Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Talking COP, the new podcast from the University of Salford's sustainability, climate and environment experts. I'm Victoria Coleman and I will be your host for today. Joining me we have Dr Silvia Tedesco, Associate Professor of Sustainability within the University's Centre for Sustainable Innovation. Silvia is here to chat to us about the opportunities that are available for decarbonisation, the work she's doing in this space and what businesses could do to reduce their environmental footprint on the road to net zero. Hi Silvia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Victoria.
So I think our main question for you today is how could AI help drive decarbonisation?
AI can play a big role in driving decarbonisation, and it will do so by optimising energy systems, reducing carbon footprint, and generally speaking enabling better decision making. So how does it do this? It utilizes a complex set of techniques such as machine learning, computer vision and optimizing algorithms and other similar techniques that are data-driven to extract meaningful information from what is typically a very large data set of data. So what does data look like for decarbonisation? So we are talking about, for example, energy consumption data, emissions data, levels of pollutants, for example, like the ones that you see, the sensors that you see at the corners of the street that are capturing CO2 data on the road, and other similar carbon footprint related data. And what it does, after doing an in-depth analysis of this data, it can basically extract predictive models of occurrence or trend or behavior that can inform decision making, but sometimes they can also suggest interventions that are needed. And so some areas of application in this realm would be, for example, forecasting renewable energy production. So, for example, in those plants that have solar or wind power plants, you will be able to analyze weather data. So solely based on weather data, you can basically analyze and predict what the energy production would be at that specific site or location. So it would analyze things, for example, like solar irradiance or wind speed at that particular location, and that will then translate into what is the predicted energy levels at that particular site at that particular time of the day. And it's amazing because this obviously translates into a more stable energy grid, and that also means not having to rely on backup fossil fuels.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. I'll just follow on to our next question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Can you share some examples of the devices currently available to the market or products that are out there currently that are enabling people to reduce their carbon footprint, like just a little bit more detail and exactly kind of what they do in their role?
What they are.
Yeah.
I think a very practical example that people can relate to very quickly is the Internet of Things devices and smart sensors that you would have in your house, like smart thermostat, for example, that are connected to your phone devices. They basically record what your habits are. So, for example, how often you are in the house, what is the temperature setting that you would prefer, what rooms you actually go to more often, so spending time there, because that is connected to lighting preferences, for example, and it would then extrapolate your behavior. And acting on that will preset the temperature of the room before you come home, for example, and it will automatically switch that off when you're not at home. And that way you can basically, and sometimes I was reading that very recently, it could also send you suggestions through your phone on how you can change your behavior to have a lower carbon footprint. So making you a suggestion to, for example, turn off the TV standby, or if it looks at lighting, so for example, to turn off the lighting when you leave, it can do that automatically, but it can come up with suggestions that will help you identify your most energy intensive activities, and then you can make an informed decision.
Oh, amazing. Do you know what? That's so handy. Thank you so much for talking us through that. And I guess our final question for today is, what could the government be doing to further support decarbonisation through the adoption of technology?
A few things. When you read the reports from the government or other associations that are working in this space, you find a list that is a very extensive list of actions that would be required. But so for today, I'll just say what for me are the most important ones and probably the most urgent. There is obviously R&D, so research and development. That means there is a need to invest more in studying how these technologies, so AI, for example, but everything that comes with digitalization, for example, can be implemented in our daily lives. So the home example that I was giving you before, but also how we can implement that within small businesses, which do not avail of a lot of money to invest. So how the government should support them in their innovation, how they can implement AI at a very low cost, or what are these intervention schemes that are necessary to fund their activities so they can implement AI. And then on the other range of the spectrum, so the very big corporate organization, how can they maximize what AI has to offer in terms of decarbonizing their activities and helping them becoming more and more sustainable, because obviously they will have a much larger carbon footprint. So maybe looking at how they can embed this tool at supply chain level, so not just then looking at the company operations, but also expanding that up and down the supply chain. What are their suppliers doing? How they can take better decisions based on their carbon footprint or the carbon footprint of their distribution channels, for example. And supply chains can be really, really massive, and the amount of data that is necessary to collect to make predictions and decisions is enormous. And which takes me to my next point. I think the second thing to do is probably invest a little bit more in our infrastructure to be able to collect and store large amounts of data. You need to have, big storage centers for AI, and they are quite high in cost. Or to enable probably real-time collection of data, you need to have probably invest a little bit more in 5G, so something that could be could provide the speed for exchanging a vast amount of info and processing a vast amount of data. That is certainly, I think, the major two that I would say is important to do for business and at infrastructure level. And then possibly a third one, which I think is probably is equally important, is to make people aware of the what artificial intelligence or digitalization is capable of providing to people, because I don't think people know what AI is and what it means for how it becomes real in their lives. So possibly funding awareness campaigns that are able to talk to people and inform them about what they can achieve, and possibly giving them some information about price as well.
Yeah. Amazing. That's really great points. Thank you so much. I didn't know a lot of that, so thank you very much for educating me as well. Silvia, thank you so much for also coming into the studio and for chatting with me today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.